All right. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're coming from, and welcome to this NCEA 2021 live session. Thanks for your patience as it took us a while to get up and running, but we are here and ready for you. Our next session is going to be led by Sister Mary Paul McCaughey, who is the author of our newest publication at NCEA, Grace and Guts for School Leaders, Practical Prayers. Sister Mary Paul, we're so glad to have you here at NCEA 2021. And for those of you that are joining us, we invite you to participate using the messaging and question functions. And just a reminder that you'll have a session evaluation at the end that you'll be able to fill out to provide feedback, to track your participation. And with that said, Sister Mary Paul, let's turn it over to you.
Hey, John, thank you so much. This is one of those crazy things. I could have taped this, and then I thought, you know what? It's a little more vulnerable being live. You don't know if you're going to get the copier start on you, or the phone ring, or the yard guys, or worse yet, your internet unstable. I had given a talk with Kathy Mears, a blog on this book, The Grace and Guts, and I thought, you know, when I was doing that blog, I didn't have the guts to probably put it into first person. So I thought I ought to do that today and really try to put this talk into really the heart that it is. Those of you who know me usually know me wearing this. And I think it's a wonderful witness and a wonderful professionalism. But I got thinking too, for vulnerability, maybe you should see me as my family sees me. And this is how they see me. And we bring ourselves, don't we, as leaders, to the situation, to life, to prayer, to our work in schools as ourselves, as our whole selves. So I hope you'll excuse the no veil today, and that's the reason for it. I spent a long time as a principal. I'm 71 years old, and I did administration for over 35 years. So go figure. That's a lot of time, whether as a school principal or president, assistant principal, or superintendent of schools. And no matter what, I think I've discovered that we, as school leaders, have this kind of discomfort in recognizing ourselves as a spiritual leader of a school. What I don't think we have a problem with is knowing how much we need God and how much we need prayer. And as we go through this, there's some realities of faith leaders. And the first thing is, if we are a faith leader, we know that Christ is incarnate in us, that we are the face of Jesus for that school. And there's a huge responsibility of your tone of voice, the way you smile, who you are, how you interpret life, and the decisions that you make reflect our deep belief in Jesus, even if we don't know how to always articulate that. I think, too, we're incredibly aware as school leaders or wannabe leaders or those loving leaders, to broaden our audience. We're aware of our own vulnerabilities. We know that we just bring ourselves to this project. That's all we have, is who we are. And so we bring ourselves to this project, this beautiful vision of what it means to create, transform, be a part of, support, grow a Catholic school. And we know, too, that every day is new. There isn't a way that in our lives that one day replicates the other. That's part of the excitement of it, but it's also the challenge to ourselves and our vulnerabilities to keep smiling, to keep believing, to keep going. So I'm going to just stop for 1 second and invite you, just literally for 30 seconds, to reflect just for a minute when you felt compelled to pray during the school day, other than at the start of class or on the PA at the beginning or end of the day, or at some of those more formal prayer moments. So just think about that for a second. When do you feel like you were called to prayer? And if it's okay, then I'd like to share just a really short prayer that actually was in the book. It's the first one. It's the first one I wrote, so it wound up in the first page. And it really came to the fact that, as Kathy Mears said to me, she discovered she was grinding her teeth too. So I was grinding my teeth. There was no doubt about it. As a young principal, I was grinding my teeth, and I think I kept grinding my teeth. So the title of this prayer is My Teeth Hurt. I am not sure, my God of perfect smiles, if my teeth ache from clamping my mouth shut during the day or grinding my molars during a long, worried night. Loosen me up, Lord, knowing that laughter creates the perfect jaw position. Let your breath squeeze through my clenching. Let me chew on real bread, on your bread. Open my mouth to breathe your praise. And I got inspired really from Walter Farrell, a fellow Dominican, who said, let God tend to the hopeless looking things. It seems to me quite entrancing to be able to pile into bed, realizing there's someone so big as God to do the worrying that has to be done. As you reflect on your day, you know that you're integrating all of those moments. I did too, without knowing it, becoming a Tevye, the fiddler on the roof, the one who kind of talks to God. And I guess it was better than talking to oneself. But as I grew older, I'm like, you know what? This is something weird. I'm kind of growing in prayer. I don't even know what I'm doing. It's not formal prayer. It's just because it's needed. I know that I'm not my own source of strength. That Jesus said to his apostles, I will talk through you. Don't worry what you're going to say to the big wigs. I'm going to be that breath of life in you. Don't worry. Don't worry. You are the one who can be my voice. And I think too, that quick prayer, to be sure, they say prayer is more listening than speaking. Think of the amount of times we spend truly listening to kids, to parents, to board members, to alumni, to community members. Know that, we don't know always what's happening. We have to have a real humility in the face of the unknown, and that courage to go ahead and to keep acting in faith and in hope and in as loving way as we can. So to shape an understanding of prayer, I think as a school leader, is to see that it is integrating the moment, that it is being present to that moment, and to know that God is with us in that moment. The times I've really blown it are when I forgot that. When I thought it was about me, when I was more worried about what the audience was going to think. It really is about the one who informs and speaks to us. I'd like you to stop for just a second yourself to kind of, as I promised I would, and see if you could just apply something to your life event. A time you remember where you said that short prayer. You remember what we used to call them? We can't even say that anymore, but those short prayers that just said, oh Lord, yikes, where it's something that's real and really rooted in what I would call best practice. So have you had a time when you were conscious that it wasn't you working, that it was really the Lord working? Let's take just a couple seconds to think that through. I don't know about you, but I've defined some of those moments as extraordinary graces and ordinary graces. And those extraordinary graces are the ones perhaps we're most conscious of. Losing a child, or being in the middle of a funeral of a parent, where we've lost our own way. where we felt vulnerable personally. And then you have some of the professional pressures on time of that. When you are in the middle of a strategic plan, or when you got construction happening in your building, when you have a personnel crisis, when you know that there are changes that need to be made, or a difficulty in a classroom that you know needs immediate intervention. Those are those school emergencies where you wind up in the back of an ambulance, where you are the one checking the zones frantically to see why that fire alarm or other alarm is going off. When you're in the crucible of accreditations and processes. I also think there's some ordinary graces, just those every day of getting into the classroom, nurturing your teachers, walking through the lunchroom, living that school cycle, knowing that what happens every month in terms of the calendar, both school tradition and non-school traditions, meetings and phone calls. Why not? Those are so ordinary, and our whole life seems to be taken up with somebody wanting to meet with us in reality or on Zoom these days. It's one big conference, one big Teams meeting, one big Google thing, one big Zoom. So how do we handle those things? I even put a prayer in about the copying machine, because you could hear that click clack at the copier back in the days when we had it and used it so much, all through the school. And I kept thinking, what are we doing? Curriculum and curriculum planning fall into ordinary graces. Each one of you probably thought of a moment and defined those moments. Just very briefly, if it's okay, I'd like to share both an ordinary moment and an extraordinary moment with you. Let's do, if we could, the ordinary moment. And I called this Recycled. Blessed are the blue bins. Does the future of the earth really depend on my sticking an ungloved hand into the barrel to redeem one more really sticky aluminum can? One more grimy sheet of paper? Maybe. Or maybe it is about truly sweating the small stuff, respecting the dust mote as a part of the universe, knowing that you see all of it, dear God, and smile. Ordinary moments are special moments. Ordinary moments make up the bulk, thank God, of our times as leaders. But there are also times like the emergency room. Waiting. No sense of time in this small, cold, chaotic place. Humming with unmet needs and with fear. We wait to hear, to be shown in, to do something besides simply be here in an emergency room. But be here we must, as presence is precious and relationships fragile. As we wait for this parent or guardian, Lord, who waits for us, we sense the weight of your concern for each life you have entrusted to us. And we pray, be with us, be with them. And of course, the quote from that was Milton's, "They also serve who only stand and wait." And sometimes that's all we could do as school leaders, is wait in the presence of God, in empathy, in care with those who need us. How much of our day, emergency or not, is spent with that? Is spent with that listening, loving word with a teacher, is spent with that kid who thinks the world has ended because the lunch got crushed or taken. We know that there are those ordinary and extraordinary moments. Like me, having lived sadly long enough to have buried too many school children, I know that the stark loss and emergency and the intensity of service and communication, the real demands that come in times of crisis, are related 5 years later perhaps to that blooming tree outside your office or courtyard in honor of that child. The flowering tree outside the school becomes a reminder of that intensity of what happened during it. The only place we go, both in looking, I think, at the blossoms now and in knowing that parents still grieve, is to our hearts in prayer and to continue as leaders to make our hearts as big as we can, even if it makes us uncomfortable. Let's stop then for just one more minute. And I'd ask you, if you have a pen handy, to simply take 30 seconds and to jot down some of those ordinary or extraordinary moments of grace in which you felt called to pray. Amen. And I'm the last person in the world that would ever written a prayer book. I can't tell you how many of my dear religious superiors would come get me and say, sweetie, yes, you were at morning prayer and you were at mass, but guess what? We haven't seen you for evening prayer in weeks, maybe not even for dinner in weeks. And certainly when you were staying through those meetings and visiting with parents who could only come after work, and you know what it was like, going back for the basketball games and the board meetings and everything else starting at 7 o'clock, 7:30. So people who know me are like laughing out loud. They're going, Paul, really? A book on prayer? You? Hello. And so it was a total God of surprise. And the surprise was getting a call from Kathy Mears, who said, you know what? Our principals don't have their own prayer book. And just something that they can pick up. And I said, okay, I'll do it. But what I really want to do is make it just short and practical and real. And something that just really invites them to pray themselves, so that they know, hey, if I can do it, anybody can do it. And that's kind of the birth of Grace and Guts, was Kathy's call. And I immediately just sat down and started writing extraordinary, just going through. And it was just like rapid. This, what's in school, what's in school, what's in school. And then going back and remembering, putting those things together in retrospect was perhaps some better practice than I even used at the time. And in a sense, reliving them. And that's what Eucharist is a reliving of that passion, of that Paschal mystery. And so we relive our events, and we can put and have prayer put that in a perspective for us. My goal was that, you could have written this book and it should just make you itch. I'm itching to write more, and maybe need to start doing it right now and being better about doing journaling and becoming a better person and more integrated person of prayer, even as I work now with my college students at DePaul. They need it, I need it, and I think I would be a better instructor for it, and better perspective for them as future principals and superintendents. So you could have written this book and you could have written it better. But I invite you to write your own book in your own life, just as it left me itching for more. So this book is not for general consumption. It's not a handy glossary of prayers. You don't put this on the PA, right? Because if the kid doesn't show up, or you get desperate at a board meeting, although a couple of things probably could be used for a board meeting, you're not gonna, it's for you. It's in small pieces of terror, and small pieces of ordinary, and small pieces of reflection, enough for you to be able truly to write your own. So this book becomes then an invitation to you, an invitation to be. Prayer is the essential tool of a Catholic school leader. And I don't really like the word tool. I think that sounds pretty terrible. Really, Prayer is probably a part of our very bones if we become an effective leader. As we look at things, as we reconstruct them, we are going to become more whole. And more whole equals more holy. The prayer becomes, in a sense, a part of our very bones. Like life, I think praying is a process. And it's a process for both grace and guts. Sometimes our prayer terms as a telescope. Lord, show me what to do. Help me look forward. Show me that vision. Give me the words to speak in this occasion. Other times, our prayer is really a rearview mirror. It's like, Lord, I know I blew it. Help me get to bed. Help me heal this. What am I going to do better the next time? Kind of even though I'm a Dominican, I love the Jesuit examination of conscience. If I could only leave it alone and really kind of know that, hey, God didn't call me to be perfect. God called me to be there. And if you can be there, you can use that rear view mirror for growth and not beat yourself up. Because if you beat yourself up, you're really going to be beating other people up along with you. So part of it is allowing that forgiveness to flood you as a school leader. And I have to admit, there are still things that I'm walking around not healed about that I wished I'd done better, and think, oh God, that school shouldn't have closed. I'm going to hell. That was wrong. And how could I stand up in front of those people and say those things? Didn't believe it in my heart. What am I going to do? How do I handle that? How do I turn that guilt into action so that other schools can grow and be creative, and so that leaders can have the strength to do maybe what I didn't do well? So I think we've suddenly realized that this prayer, wherever it's taking us, isn't really our prayer, but belongs to the one who really loves us. That prayer is just an invitation into the heart of God. And where we live there and can love there and laugh there, suddenly things become transformative. My patron saint, St. Paul, said, we see dimly as in a mirror. But even seeing dimly is seeing a little. We're getting the shadows. It's okay if it's not perfect. It's okay if everything isn't bright and beautiful. We are seeing dimly as in a mirror what's being promised us into the future, and we're walking into a future with a kind of hope that only God can give us in one of the greatest gifts to the church, the gift of our Catholic schools. So a couple of final thoughts here before I open it up for questions. That's number one is, as a school leader, you're a prayer whether you know it or not. You didn't think you were maybe the spiritual leader or being comfortable being the spiritual leader, but guess what? If you're doing it well, you're praying, and you're praying every day, and you're praying it at the time, and you're listening, and your presence, and your care, and your hard work, and your late nights. That is God at work, and it's sustaining presence. So you're a prayer whether you know it or not. Own it. Know that you are a leader at prayer and that you have been gifted with grace and guts. Secondly, be gentle with your own failures and go ahead and take those to the feet of the one who can heal them and transform them. If you were there, if you were present to it and did your best, normally we feel pretty good. If we want to re-second think our own thought process, our own engagement of stakeholders, our own decision making, I think we can do that. And we can do that in a way that still encourages us to have the courage to act. Because better to act with what you know and out of love than not to have acted at all. So we ask the Lord to grace us with that activity, to grace us with that courage, and to grace us with healing every day so that we can integrate and move on into being a transformative leader the next day. So I guess my dedication was basically to leaders and to those who love them. And I would just say, you are unwilling saints. And it is okay to be an unwilling saint. And I have, if it's okay with John, one final prayer share within the time, and then I'll open it up to discussion. And as I get older, this one, it was a pleasure. It's a pleasure, the well-trained hostess repeats, a pleasure. I smile, Lord, for isn't that what we do? Serving both needs and wants across a school day and into a community dealing with issues of finance and governance, discipline and planning, scholarship and training and governance, communications and crisis. Someday we will end this crazy supervisory and administrative journey, this life of leadership in a Catholic school. When all is said and done, we set down the coffee pot of our outpoured skills and care, and we sigh, just for you. It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure being with you. It was a pleasure knowing of your gifts as school administrators. It was a pleasure inviting you to share your own journey, to have your own grace and guts in prayer. I was going to share my screen, but I think what I'm going to do is just put in chat my email, and you can contact me anytime. And I am very, very happy to speak with any of you anytime around this topic or anything else. God bless you all. John, do we have any questions?
Yeah, so what we're gonna do, we'll open it up for questions. And so we just encourage you that if you were following and listening along, to post your questions, post your comments, we'll be able to get them over to Sister Mary Paul. I have a question for you just to sort of start. School leadership, especially in a Catholic school, can feel like a really lonely chair, right? Like it can be very isolating. So how do you see using, Grace and Guts and this opportunity for prayer to not only do that inward reflection, but also to connect with others?
What I would do is find, there were principles that made me laugh, and ironically, they were lay men and one lay brother, head of all boys Catholic high schools, and we had each other on speed dial. And I think Catholic school principals, lay and lay and religious, need a sounding board. They need to sit and laugh. They need to write their own book. They need to share that journey. And I think, John, it is lonely. And so creating an intentional community and leaving some of the school stuff at home to let our family heal us. Like, my mother's not going to be 99 in July. I can't get away with anything. She looks at me and said, "You're going on like this, you're out of your mind." I mean, it's that kind of thing. We need real people in our lives. And I see that Cedric, it says, as a high school principal, what's the best way to effectively engage students in praying for vocations? Look, I think what we do is we give them time. We need to, I'm so thrilled that it's a high school lay principal asking that question. Everyone has a calling. It's not going to be maybe to religious life. I mean, you already have a vocation then as a high school lay principal that is deep and rich and nourishing. But if you're going to pray for religious vocations, I would actually give them some space and time for prayer. There's no other way. Encourage retreats. There's no other way. Encourage that they get to know a few crazy religious. There's no other way, because that's what you need to do. You need to be invited into a religious community. So if you're crazy, if you know anybody who's crazy enough to open their convent or their rectory, their abbey, that says, "Hey, we want these crazy kids over for dinner," or we'll run a small retreat for interested people in our chapel. If you can support that, kids come to identity in high school, and they'll come to an identity of religious vocation. So that's a beautiful question. Relationship and a little space for prayer and reflection would be a wonderful thing for all your kids.
It's a great question and a great response. Thanks, Sister Mary Paul. Something here you had mentioned in the course of the just sort of talking about how to sort of approach this book, and you were talking about this letting go of chasing perfection or chasing completeness, chasing wholeness. What was the tipping point for you? And you've been in Catholic education and served in so many different roles. What do you feel with that particular sort of understanding, that particular piece of wisdom? What shifted that for you? Was there a pivotal experience? Was it a set of experiences?
You
How did
mean
you
in
learn
terms
to live with the mess?
of leader of accepting Catholic school
Yeah,
leadership or accepting prayer? Accepting Catholic school leadership?
yeah,
Yeah, I'll tell you what it was. Um, this sounds really awful. I remember being a teacher and thinking to myself, both as an elementary school teacher and then as a high school teacher and young, I only spent 5 years in elementary and then went on to high school and pretty soon, and I was like, I think I can do this. I think I might even be able to do it better than the person who's doing it. So it's that little awful sense of pride. And then when I got into it, I realized, oh Lord, you really can't. Now you really understand what that person was happening, what was really happening maybe in the life of that leader. But I think everybody has to have a little itch and a little love to do it. I wanted to be a psychologist and went back and practically was all ready to start to do counseling only. And I'm like, hell's bells. I can see 20 clients, maybe 40 clients a week, but I could change a whole system by being a principal of a high school of 1,800. Think of how many families you can touch. So that's a great question, John. I see. Where can I finish the book? NCEA, yay, did it. It's their book. I mean, it
yeah.
wouldn't be here without crazy Kathy saying, write a book. And I'm going, you got to be kidding. Moi. This is somebody said we start and end our school day in prayer to inspire families. But not every class. What do other schools do? I really, honestly, and it's a great discussion. I always asked the teachers, even high school, to start with just 30 seconds of transition. We've discovered that even now that we put our classes on Zoom, haven't we? That people need a chance to detox, they need to sit down, they need to just center themselves. So even if you have non-Catholic teachers who aren't comfortable even assigning kids in a row to do a short prayer, just to give them that second to put themselves in the presence of God. So yes, every class period I think should, and many do. And I think it's integrating that into the day. And by the way, it could be in the middle of a period. A teacher in English could stop and say, I want to stop a minute. Hidden English and history, those things really lend themselves, all the ELAs, to just that instant prayer. Math a little less so, unless the teacher goes, rah, see the beauty of God in the order, and you can do that. And we have another principle that says, what's the best to inspire families and students to enhance their prayer life? Oh gosh, give them the best liturgies you can give in your school. We knew that we were doing too good a job as high schools I was at, because people didn't want to go back to their parishes. They felt fed at our own liturgies, at our own prayer services. You can encourage them to do that. Hey, you're on the PA a lot. I even have a prayer about being on the PA. Okay, so you're on the PA a lot. Hey, at those parent meetings, invite them to prayer. As hey, this is the parent open house. Can we stop for a minute and pray for your child, for their growth, and for your teacher who's working with them? It's not rocket science, and it's not out of a book, and it can be mostly silence. So I think the best approach, there's a lot of wonderful prayer materials out there. And I know some of the NCEA sponsors, plug, have some great family materials for both, especially for elementary. But I think high schools can do it too, of just how to feed in that prayer. And when you send home your communication, to just have a short line from a saint or something else, just to show, hey, not only are we Catholic, but we're integrating this every day into what we do and who we are.
Something I noticed in just your responses to the last couple of questions, and what you've also talked about, like when you were sort of walking through the book, and how you sort of see principles writing these prayers, and these prayers come from the heart, is you talk a lot about, it's almost like you're a big fan of the pause, right? So a pause at the start for prayer, right? No matter what the class is, a pause in the middle of a class to pray. You talk about sort of when we encounter parents, or when principals go through the day, it's the power of the pause. And then everything that sort of flows from it, that's where sort of the grace
And isn't it? And think about it. When you were school leader, you went running into the office to take care of this crisis and have this family there. And you knew what was your best thing to do? It was to go 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004. You needed to act and not react. And think about that breath as being that breath of the spirit. I mean, that's the only way I could. It wasn't just good psychology. What's good for the whole human person is making us saints. We don't want to be, we're dragged into holiness, kicking and screaming. But if I were to stop and to say to you, hey, this is going to help you be a more loving, whole, real human being, to put yourself within that presence of God, to take that pause, to listen to the spirit within, to listen to even the noise and chaos without, so that you know what you're really responding to. Respondere, huh? God calls, we ask. You have to have that first sense of listening, and then of course listening to your own chaos and stopping till you have that minute for yourself. So yeah, I'm not, because I'm so impulsive. Yip, 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 yip. I don't ask anybody who knows me, but my most effective things have been after I go, oops, take a break. Just take the pause that refreshes, and then jump in a little more confident that it's coming from a real center. And our center is Jesus. We can't ignore that as Catholic school leaders.
I love it. If you're okay, we could take one more question.
Sure.
Yeah. So the question that I've got here, I think is a great one, and it talks about sort of meaningfully involving faculty members in prayer. And I think I'm not sure if we have not tackled this one. How do you help the faculty members to become involved in meaningful prayer, sort of not just speaking through the mouth, but from the heart?
That's very hard. And I think it starts from your onboarding. It starts very much from your faculty orientation. Begin with it from your own vulnerability, and even in a short way. And then invite people. Adults have a harder time praying together, probably often, especially spontaneously, than kids. So to structure smaller groups for larger faculty, I knew a brilliant elementary school principal who gave his faculty a scripture reading every week. And then he's told the teams to talk about that reading before school over coffee. He gave them donuts in little teams, or after later, kind of sometimes after school. But they became richly contemplative by just having that encouragement and his vulnerability of saying, let's talk about something more. But you have to bring that on from your time you've done your orientation. Then when you do your faculty retreats and renewal, you have to model it, and you have to stop and say, whoops, I gooped that up, even yourself, to have that vulnerability. They don't have to be, they're so unsure, they want to be perfect prayers. So that's why everybody has a little sheet of paper, right? Or they offload it to the prayer leader of the day, right. Because it's tough. But at least once a week, say, I'm going to own this prayer. I'm going to lead it. I'm going to figure out how to do it, and to give them the materials that they need, but also to let them know that it doesn't have to be much. Again.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that sort of that dual focus of like that invitation, right, to reflection, but also that vulnerability that has to be modeled right from the get-go.
Exactly. And we do anything else in prayer. And that's why I felt so bad about Kathy's podcast, because she was all vulnerable. And I'm like talking in the third person, like best practices for principal. And I'm like, hell spells, I'm not going to do it this time. Because if I'm going to invite people to prayer, I better do it too.
Awesome. Good stuff. Well, Sister Mary Paul, thank you so much. And I think you so perfectly modeled that vulnerability and that approach to how we take that moment and that pause as leaders to engage in prayer. That's awesome.
Thank you so much. And we'll all go back to this when we have to. When we need to get order in the gym, this is a fine way to do it. But for spiritual faith, write your own book. All right.
Awesome. All right.
Love you, John. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Sister Mary Paul. For those of you attending, just a reminder, Sister Mary Paul's book, Grace and Guts, Practical Prayers for School Leaders is available at the NCEA bookstore at ncea.org, but also in the Cadence platform. So if you click on the home button on the bottom right corner of your screen, click on the bookstore button, you'll be able to access Sister Mary Paul's fantastic prayer book, as well as all of our tremendous resources and publications that we have through NCEA. Just a reminder that in a brief moment, you're going to see a session evaluation, which is a good opportunity for you to provide feedback. Tell us how much you loved this session. Tell us what we can do to help make your conference experience much better. We're going to see you with the learning lounges in just about 10 minutes or so. Grab a snack, grab lunch, grab some coffee, whatever fluids you need. Jump into one of those 12 learning lounges or one of our sessions, and we'll see you soon. From all of us here at NCEA, thank you so much for joining this live session, and we will see you briefly.